I never imagined a simple translation could unlock hope. Her courage stunned a billionaire's heart. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. It started with a cacophony of sirens, shouting voices, and the choking haze of smoke that crept through the air, wrapping around me like a snake ready to squeeze. That day, everything I knew and loved turned to ash. Mira stood there, trembling, in the middle of the chaos. Her dark hair whipped around her face as she struggled to hold on to the paper, her hands shaking with a mix of fear and determination. Those were the moments when time felt suspended. When I saw her, I felt my heart clench. Those wide, fearful eyes held a spark of something, a flicker of resilience that seemed utterly out of place amid the frenzy. My heart raced. We had bonded over dreams and whispered secrets. She was my best friend, my safe harbor in a stormy sea of uncertainty. I still remember those warm afternoons filled with laughter outside the cafe where we met. Mira spoke in vibrant bursts, her joy contagious while mine felt tethered to the ground. Her laughter could fill any empty room, yet that day, it felt like the world was closing in on her. Change crashed down hard, like a thunderclap. Mira's family faced pressure from every side, trapped in a web of debt and despair. They depended on her brilliance. Her talent for languages was their last lifeline. As she translated words from paper to hope in front of that formidable billionaire, I saw something transform in her. It was like watching a phoenix rise from the ashes, yet I feared what that would mean for me. The billionaire, dressed in a suit that bore the weight of the world, leaned in closer, his deep-set eyes filling with curiosity and intrigue. He was known for his cold heart, his pursuit of power unmatched. But in that moment, he looked at Mira as if she were a treasure he couldn't bear to lose. My breath hitched as she spoke, her voice steadying, cascading over the noise like a warm blanket. I darted my eyes around the room, sensing the tension. Others watched, eyebrows raised, expressions a mix of envy and disbelief. How could this ordinary girl capture a titan's attention? A gust of disbelief churned within me as I felt my pulse quicken. And then something shifted. A soundless ripple moved through the crowd. The billionaire reached out, his fingers brushing her wrist, and I felt a jolt of something between them: fear, danger, maybe even forbidden attraction. My heart thrummed wildly as I realized their fate might intertwine in ways I could never have anticipated. The stakes climbed higher as Mira's family's troubles loomed over her. Would this chance bring freedom, or would it shatter her spirit? As the air thickened with unspoken truths and possibilities, I could hardly breathe. Just then, before the applause could erupt, I caught a glimpse of her face. Was it fear or exhilaration that made her eyes shine? Everything hung in the balance, and I thought, what would she do next? And just like that, the silence screamed louder than the chaos around us. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Myra's voice echoed in the silent room, a soft tremor of determination breaking through her facade, yet her eyes danced with a mixture of light and shadow. The billionaire, his fingers still lingering at her wrist, leaned closer, as if drawn by the gravity of the moment, but I felt the air turn dense with uncertainty. Just behind that poised exterior, I saw the tremors of doubt. What would happen if she accepted this new path? I stood frozen, torn between congratulating her and pulling her back from the precipice that seemed to loom ahead. I remembered her voice, filled with hope, as she spoke about dreams transcending borders, about making a difference through her talents. Yet now, that same passion felt caught in a web of consequences, stitched tightly by relationships that could lead her away from everything we'd built together. The applause erupted suddenly, and I flinched, snapping out of my reverie. The room swarmed with energy, a world of opportunity blooming around Mira and the billionaire. They were tethered together by a fragile thread of potential, and yet, with every clapping hand, I felt my own heart erode. What would it mean if she succeeded? Would the distance between us stretch infinitely, leaving only shadows of what might have been? As the crowd ebbed, I forced myself to break the spell. I approached her, searching for a sign of what she truly felt amid the chaos. "Mira," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "are you okay?" Her head turned slowly, a smile tugging at the edges of her mouth, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I don't know," she admitted, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "Everything feels impossible now." I sighed, drawing closer, enveloping her in the cocoon of our friendship. "You can do this, but you don't have to do it alone. If you need me, I'm here," I insisted, my heart feeling like a lead weight in my chest. Before she could answer, a man stepped in, dapper and confident. He was a business associate of the billionaire. I recognized the glint in his eyes. It was the same hunger that drove many in his world. He approached, flashing a charming grin. "Mira, you were remarkable. I'd like to discuss some potential projects with you." Underneath the layers of politeness, I sensed an undercurrent of something darker, ambition wrapped in silk. I felt my spine stiffen, an instinct warning me of his intentions. "Mira, wait," I murmured, stepping slightly in front of her. "This might not be what you want." But she moved around me, her decision firm despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. "Thank you, yes, I'd love to talk," she replied, her voice steadying as she inadvertently distanced herself from me. As the two walked away, my heart sank further. I felt discarded, a fleeting memory of something precious. Alone, I took a step back, desperately seeking comfort in the audience. Faces filled with congratulations and admiration blurred around me, but in that moment, I felt like I was drowning. Days passed, and Mira slipped further into her new life, her brilliance shining as she navigated this strange partnership. I watched from a distance, feeling like a spectator to a script I hadn't written. Each success for her opened a hollow chasm within me. It wasn't just loneliness that clawed at my heart, it was the gnawing fear that I might lose her to a world that felt so foreign to me. One evening, after yet another extravagant gala, she called. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Can I come over?" I felt a rush of warmth at her request but quickly masked it with a sheen of apprehension. "Of course. Is everything okay?" I need to talk," she confessed. A heaviness hung in the air between us, yet I couldn't keep the hope from blossoming inside me. Perhaps this would be the moment when she'd unravel the weight that had begun to show in her eyes. When she arrived, the familiar scent of her perfume wrapped around me, intoxicating yet bittersweet. I watched as she paced the room, her fingers tangled in her hair. "I never expected any of this," she began softly, "and sometimes, it feels like I'm losing myself." I stepped closer, ready to catch her if she fell. "Mira, you haven't lost anyone. Just remember who you are amidst all this." Tears brimmed in her eyes, glistening like lost stars. But then her gaze shifted, the flicker of guilt sharpening her features. "His world is so alluring, so seductive," she murmured. "I thought I would help my family, but now, it feels like I'm losing everything, even you." I held my breath, sensing a fracture in her resolve. "You haven't lost me, not yet." But just when I thought I'd reached her, she paused, hesitating in a way that felt like a countdown. "What if I told you I was offered a permanent position? A future with him, and it's everything I ever dreamed about. But it could mean I might have to leave this place and you." My heart plummeted. "Mira." I reached out to her, helpless against the torrent of emotions that threatened to burrow deep into my heart. "I don't know what to do," she cried, and her voice cracked, breaking against the weight of her uncertainty. "I feel torn." And then, as if fate chose that very moment to unleash its storm, the door swung open unexpectedly, revealing the silhouette of the billionaire himself, standing resolutely in the doorway. The air hung thick with unspoken questions, and in that singular moment, I knew our lives were about to be irreversibly altered. The billionaire's presence filled the room with an oppressive energy. He stood there, imposing and immaculate, yet beneath his polished exterior, I could sense a tempest brewing. My eyes darted back to Mira, whose expression shifted from despair to something resembling trepidation mixed with curiosity. Her internal conflict was laid bare for him to see, and it felt as if the walls of the room were closing in around us. "Mira," he said, his voice smooth like silk yet laced with authority, "I didn't mean to intrude, but we need to discuss your future. There's an opportunity on the table that you cannot ignore." I felt the ground beneath me shift. How could he approach her now, at her most vulnerable moment? Anger simmered just below the surface, but I held it back, unwilling to escalate the situation. Instead, I stepped forward, channeling my hope into a quiet resolve. "Maybe this isn't the right time," I interjected firmly, attempting to fill the air with a protective force. "She needs to process everything first." He turned to me, an eyebrow raised in bemusement, as if my input was an amusing, yet ultimately inconsequential, detail he had not expected. "This isn't just about today," he said, a hint of condescension creeping into his voice. "Mira has a chance to step into a world of influence and success. This could change her life." I could feel Mira's eyes flicker between him and me, her features catching the light of indecision. "But what about my life now?" she asked, vulnerability cracking through her composure. "What about my dreams and my friendship?" Which she hesitated, looking pained as she tried to articulate the depth of our bond. Before I could grasp the moment and soothe her fears, the billionaire surged forward, his decay of charm revealing a glimmer of desperation. "You dream of helping your family, don't you? This is your chance. The world needs your voice, and I can offer you a platform unlike any other." Her gaze dropped, hands wringing together as uncertainty pulsed through her. It was as if the very act of standing before him transformed her, capturing the essence of hope while casting aside the weight of the past. "I do want to help them," she whispered, the words barely escaping her lips, and there it was the thin veil of ambition that had begun to smother her heart. I wanted to scream, to shake her and remind her of everything we had built together, but I felt my voice trapped in my throat. There was a flicker of realization dancing in her eyes, an indication that she might reclaim her voice from the grip of ambition, yet she teetered precariously on the edge. The billionaire's presence was suffocating. "Mira, if you take this step, you won't look back," he said, his tone velvet but edged with menace. "It's a commitment. You'd leave everything behind." He stepped closer, an electric tension crackling between us, turning the room into a battleground for her heart. Mira finally looked up, determination building within her. "I understand. But I also need some time to think." Her voice steadied, and I felt a flicker of hope reignite within me. Suddenly, as if catching the scent of her defiance, the billionaire's expression hardened. "Time is a luxury you don't have." There was finality in his voice that struck me, a warning hung in the air like guitar strings taut with the anticipation of release. "Wait," I began, determined to shield her from the storm, but he cut me off with a dismissive wave. "This isn't your decision. Mira will make her own choices." But there was a deeper darkness lurking, something I could feel even if it remained cloaked in shadow. "Mira," I turned to her, "if you have any doubts, please trust your heart. You know where you truly belong." Panic surged within me as the silence thickened, strange echoes whispering around the room. The billionaire's gaze bore into hers, raw intensity igniting the air. "This is just the beginning," he said, his smile smooth as ice. "Join me, and we can transform everything together. I can show you what it means to be truly free, to rise above the ordinary." My heart sank as I watched her wrestle with the allure of his offer and the tether of our connection. In that split second, clarity struck between us like a lightning bolt. "But at what cost?" she finally breathed, diverting her gaze to the floor. In that moment of hesitation, an unexpected tremor ran through the walls of our fragile bond. What was I willing to sacrifice to keep her grounded? I could feel the depths of the darkness begin to wrap around my heart. Suddenly, her phone buzzed on the table, a text from her family: "We need your help. Things are worse than we thought." Her expression fell further, and I realized then that she was caught between duty and desire, a war inside her that threatened to consume everything. Just then, the billionaire's phone rang, a stark distraction. Without missing a beat, he plucked it from his pocket, glancing at the screen before his face paled. "I have to take this," he said curtly. As he stepped outside, the tension spilled inside the room like a pot boiling over, leaving an echo of silence in his wake. I turned to Mira, my heart aching, searching her face for signs of clarity. "What do you want?" Her voice wavered as she struggled against the tide of decisions weighing down on her. "I don't know," she whispered, her gaze drifting to the door the billionaire just exited, loss and longing swirling together like smoke in the air. Suddenly, as if drawn by an unseen force, she reached for my hand. "I want to make the right choice." But before I could respond, the door swung open with a force so sudden that it knocked the breath from my lungs. The billionaire stood there, glancing back at us, his expression shifting from shock to determination. "I need to speak to both of you." "It's urgent," he said, and my heart stuttered, the weight of his words hanging ominously in the air. In that moment, I sensed a storm brewing on the horizon, one that threatened to unravel everything we had ever known, and the choice before Mira was about to become far more harrowing than either of us could possibly imagine. Mira's hand slipped from mine like a fleeting shadow as she turned to face the billionaire. His urgency hung palpably in the air, saturating the already tense atmosphere with a sense of impending fate. "What has happened?" she asked, her voice trembling as she struggled to maintain her composure. I stood on the periphery, trying to gauge the storm brewing behind the billionaire's icy facade. With a deep breath, he stepped fully into the room and closed the door behind him, locking us into this moment. "I just received a call about your family," he announced, his voice steady yet laced with something I couldn't quite place. Was it concern or a calculated intention? "There's been an incident." Mira's face blanched, eyes wide with fear. "What do you mean?" She pressed urgently, and I felt her body tighten next to mine as if the mention of her family invoked a gravitational pull that anchored her heart in worry. "I can't go into details," the billionaire said, his tone sharper now, "but what I do know is that they're in trouble. And you could help them." His gaze bore into hers with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. "I can expedite everything, Mira. If you decide to join me, we can address this situation immediately." I sensed the walls closing in again, the pressure of his words crushing beneath the weight of Mira's turmoil. "I don't understand," she stammered, her voice a soft tremor. "What kind of trouble?" "Nothing you can't handle, but time is of the essence. If you want to act, you need to do it now. This is your moment." His unyielding confidence masked a deeper agenda, and I watched as Myra's determination wrestled with fear, the specter of her family's plight igniting a desperate hope deep within her. "Mira," I spoke up, my heart pounding as I tried to reach her, "you don't have to make this decision right now. We can figure something out together." She turned her gaze to me, searching for solace, but the flicker of ambition sparking in her eyes pulled her back towards the billionaire. "What if this is my chance to help them?" she whispered, barely above a breath. It felt like a knife piercing through the space between us. The billionaire nodded, relentless in his persuasion. "It is. Trust me. You'd be amazed at what you can achieve with just a little push. I can offer you the tools to rescue your family and so much more." Just then, a silence enveloped the room, filled with Mira's rapid, panicked breaths. The clock ticked away her precious moments, and I could feel the weight of a decision mounting upon her shoulders like a heavy cloak. "But at what cost?" she murmured again, almost inaudibly, as if repeating my own haunting words. "Life demands sacrifice, but it also offers rewards," the billionaire replied, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper, "and this is your moment to seize both. You could leap toward your desires, towards the life you've always dreamed about." The pull of his words was magnetic to her, but I could see the tumult of her heart. "I can't just abandon everything," Mira replied with fierce resolve, defiance rising in her tone. "No, but you can transform everything into something greater." The billionaire's voice rang out, imbued with conviction. If you come with me now, you can help your family and forge a path for your future. A future I assure you will be magnificent. It was as if time slowed, each word he spoke coiling around her like a vine, threatening to pull her into his world of grandeur. I could feel my protective instincts roaring to life. Mira, think about us, I urged, trying to echo the depth of our connection over the tempests raging in her mind. The life we've built, the dreams we've shared, are you willing to let that go? Her gaze flickered between the two of us, uncertainty warping her features. I just don't know what is going to happen, she breathed, eyes glistening with unshed tears. Then trust your gut. If you need to think about this, take the time. My words, though intended to anchor her to the present, contained an underlying plea fueled by fear of losing her forever. Suddenly, the billionaire stepped closer, a predatory gleam in his eye. But this is exactly what they want: confusion. Do you think your family would want you to hesitate? Would they want you to allow your dreams to slip away? I felt the murmur of her family at the edges of her mind, the weight of their expectations pulling her across an invisible line. Mira, please, I implored, standing firm like a shield against the hurricane of influence swirling around her. Then it happened, an unexpected moment. The billionaire's phone buzzed again in his hand, breaking our charged standoff. He answered quickly, tension tightening his features. What? He barked, voice clipped. The terse conversation took a downward spiral with each shallow breath he took. No, I don't care about the repercussions. Just get it done. I caught a glimpse of vulnerability in his voice that hadn't been there before. The walls around him cracked just slightly, and I became acutely aware that whatever was happening had dimensions I couldn't see, deeper shadows intertwined with the ambition he radiated. As he took a step back, still wrapped in the urgency of the call, I seized the moment to turn to Mira. Whatever happens, you are stronger than you think. We'll face this together, regardless of what choices you make. Her eyes glistened with longing and fear, but then they settled back on the billionaire, the battle intensifying. She faltered, I need to know what is true. At that moment, the billionaire ended the call with a hard snap, instantly returning to the imposing figure he had been before. You only need to know that I can help you, he declared passionately. Out of nowhere, the tension that had filled the room erupted into a fiery crescendo when the unmistakable sound of sirens wailed from outside. Mira's breath hitched, and I felt my heart plummet. The storm that threatened to sweep her away had now become tangible, looming closer with every heartbeat. I turned to her, caught in that moment of raw vulnerability, the sirens echoing certainty of turmoil, as understanding unfurled like petals in the dark. Mira, I whispered, the impending sense of loss tightening its grip. The choice loomed before us like an abyss, and within it lay a truth neither of us could fully comprehend. Would she be able to step back from the precipice, or was her answer about to cascade into an action that might change everything? As she held my gaze, both of us knowing that this moment was fleeting yet monumental, the sirens' cries echoed through the room, drawing nearer, binding our fates together before the shadows could swallow us whole. The echoes of the sirens were like a clarion call, slicing through the thickened air of the room and enveloping us in a tangible dread. As Mira's eyes darted between me and the billionaire, time stretched, distorting reality into a roiling vortex of uncertainty. Every second felt heavy, charged with the weight of choice and consequence. Mira, I said, desperate to bring her focus back, whatever happens next, don't forget your strength. Take a breath. Think. My words hung in the air, an anchor in the rising tide of chaos. She squeezed her eyes shut, fighting the emotional onslaught that surged within her. As if sensing her turmoil, the billionaire returned to her side, his demeanor morphing from urgent to oddly gentle. Listen to me, Mira, he said, his voice mirroring calm waters against the storm brewing in her heart. I understand what you're feeling. Trust me, no one wants to see their loved ones suffer, especially not you. Let us think this through, okay? A flicker of hope ignited in her eyes, momentarily dispelling the shadows that clouded her thoughts. You can't possibly know what my family has been through, she retorted, the fire in her words caused by a swirl of anguish and despair. All they've ever wanted was for me to be safe. I know it's difficult, but I can help you navigate these waters. I promise together, we can forge a path that leads to them. His words wrapped around her like a soft caress, stirring dormant dreams inside her. Perhaps, in that moment, the billionaire was not just a figure of ambition. He could possess the means to unlock that elusive door she had searched for. Yet as Mira grappled with his promise, I felt the ground beneath my feet shift. It wasn't just the promise itself that carried weight, it was his unspoken connection to her family, the hidden truths buried beneath layers of ambition that now seemed to come to the surface. What do you know? I challenged, mustering an urgency that could rival even the sirens outside. That he turned to me, the fire in his demeanor reigniting. This isn't about me. It's about her, he shot back. But the brief flicker of defensiveness fueled by a lack of transparency sparked suspicion in my heart. I know what it's like to feel powerless. I know the desperation of watching someone you love slip away, he said, his tone softening again, though his eyes darkened with hidden remorse. What happened to you? I pressed. Why should she trust you? The billionaire's lips quirked sadly, a frown forming as a shadow danced across his features. Let's just say I've learnt that power comes at a price, and that price is often paid in blood. If I can help her avoid that, I will. The depth of his admission momentarily subdued the air, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a different man behind the brash facade, one who had experienced loss, regret, and perhaps even courage. Stepping closer to Mira, I whispered, you need to decide, but remember, this isn't just about them. You're the one who will bear the consequences, not him. Her look of confusion intensified, a palpable mix of desperation and yearning evident in her demeanor. Suddenly, a man in uniform pushed through the door, his presence as imposing as the storm outside. What is going on here? He demanded, scanning the room with calculating eyes. My heartbeat quickened, the sudden appearance of law enforcement shifted the stakes irreversibly. Sir, we're discussing urgent matters, the billionaire interjected smoothly, slipping back into the role of control. The ease with which he interacted with authority reminded me just how deep his connections ran. We're responding to a call about a disturbance, the officer stated firmly, his gaze darting between the three of us. We need to ensure everything is all right. Everything is fine, the billionaire insisted, his voice laced with authority. Yet, I sensed the fabric of the truth unraveling as the officer remained steadfast. Mira, I urged again, panic tightening my chest. What do you want? Do you want to know what is truly happening? Time is slipping away. Mira looked between us, caught in a dangerous crossfire of choices and consequences. She started, her voice quivering, I need to hear what he has to say. It stunned me, her resolve was wavering, her choice slipping like sand through fingers. Before I could react, the officer stepped closer, scrutinizing the billionaire with newfound suspicion. You seem awfully interested in this young woman. Why is that? The billionaire's eyes narrowed, and I felt the tension shift dramatically. Because I can make a difference in her life. Isn't that what you're supposed to be interested in? But as Myra's voice faltered again, the emotional undercurrent sifting through the room intensified. I don't understand what's truly at stake, she cried out, her vulnerability cascading as doubt threaded through her heart. Your family, the officer began, but the billionaire now stood tall. No one will hurt them if we move fast. They need Mira's help, and so do I. You can trust me. Then tell me everything, she replied, her voice strained but steady, summoning the courage buried deep within. Just as the chaotic nexus of emotions coalesced into her decision, the police radio crackled to life, and the officer's serious face paled. We've got reports of unrest at her family's location, he said, urgency edging into his tone. We need to go now. Mira gasped, the realization sending a jolt through her. We could go. Yes, the officer replied, shifting into motion as the gravity of the situation intensified twofold. But we can't get there without answers. In that breathless moment, the room hung suspended between choices and fears, and I realized time was slipping away once more. Mira's family was in peril, the shadows of truth just ahead, but the clemency of real answers flickered under the weight of the unknown. As she hesitated, the sirens growing louder, the piercing urgency of the moment filled the air, transforming hope into a singular question echoing through the chaotic gloom: would her choice be the key to saving her family or the catalyst for their greatest downfall? Mira's breath hitched, the weight of the decision clawing at her throat. The gravelly voice of the officer hung in the air, echoing with urgency. "We have to hurry, Mira. If anything happens I can't just leave them," she whispered, her gaze flitting to the billionaire, whose expression transformed from calculated composure to something akin to desperation. "But how can I trust you?" He took a step closer, the slightest crease forming between his brows as he searched for the words. "You don't have to trust me completely," he said. "But I can offer you a chance. The sooner we move, the better your family's chances." I felt my pulse quicken as the officer nodded and began to coordinate with his team. Shadows danced in Mira's eyes, I could see the storm brewing inside her. "What if you can't save them?" she asked, her voice trembling. The billionaire's expression softened, an empathetic swell behind those usually calculating eyes. "Then we fight for them together. But right now, I need you to believe that you have the power to change the course of this. Trust your instincts. You've neglected that for too long." The truth of his words hung heavy in the dim light. Mira had been caught in a web of fear, doubt, and an all-consuming need to protect her family. "Breathe," I urged her, instinctively placing my hand over hers as if our shared warmth could ground her. "You've got this. Whatever your choice, I'm here for you." As if drawn by an invisible thread, Mira's gaze shifted to the door, a flicker of determination breaking through her uncertainty. In that swift moment, I saw the woman she could be, the fighter who had dared to stand firm even against the most formidable odds. "I'll go," she said, drawing in a deep breath that filled the room with a newfound resolve. "But you have to promise me you'll do everything you can to help them." The billionaire nodded, his promise unwavering. "You have my word." With a sharp nod, the officer motioned to the exit, urging us both forward. The tension in the air thickened as we made our way through the door, the sirens reverberating like a funeral dirge outside. The hallway echoed with the urgency of our mission, and I sprinted alongside Mira, the pounding of our footsteps synchronizing with the frantic rhythm of my heart. That we burst out into the night, the cool air hitting us like an awakening wave. The chaos outside swirled in disarray, police cars lining the street, their blue and red lights casting an ominous hue over the scene. My heart raced faster than my feet, uncertainty coursing through my veins. "Where are they?" Mira cried, her voice rising above the clamor of voices and shouting. Fear tightened around my chest as I watched the distance between her and her family grow. She was unmoored, drifting between hope and despair. The billionaire approached a nearby officer, his stature imposing even amidst the gridlock of frantic bodies and flashing lights. "We need intel on the situation," he demanded, urgency in his voice echoing the sentiment that spooled through us all. The officer glanced between us, then nodded toward a large, square building with darkened windows. "There's been unrest reported there. Unclear if anyone has been harmed yet. We need to assess the situation before anyone goes in." Mira's eyes widened as she processed the words. "We can't just stand here. My family could be in danger." Her voice cracked as she stepped closer to the building, her bravado meeting the stark reality of her choices. "Wait!" I called, grabbing her arm gently to keep her from rushing headlong into the chaos. "We need a plan." She turned to me, her frustration spilling over. "A plan won't save them if they're in trouble right now. Time is our enemy." Her eyes were fierce, pleading for understanding. Before I could respond, the billionaire spoke, his voice steady. "We need to move strategically. Charging in without understanding the full situation might put your family at greater risk." His reason met her anger, and she took a trembling breath. I don't care what happens to me. All that matters is my family. But what if putting yourself at risk means you can't save them at all? He countered, his expression serious. Think, Mira. Your family needs you whole and unharmed. Not to mention your safety matters in the grand scheme of this. Her gaze teetered between resolve and turmoil as she stood at that fragile juncture of fear and responsibility. Just then, an officer shouted for assistance, and the atmosphere crackled with emergency. Suddenly, amidst the chaos, a piercing scream shot through the night, a chilling cry of terror that froze Mira's blood. I saw panic flood her face, her heartbeat echoing the urgency looming over us. That's them. She shouted, urgency transforming her voice into pure steel. We can't wait. In a rapid decision, she sprinted toward the building, leaving us reeling in her wake. My heart dropped into my stomach. Mira! I yelled, dashing after her, the world around me dissolving until only her safety mattered, but as we reached the entrance, the internal clamor of voices dulled, giving way to a strange silence that felt unnatural against the cacophony outside. It was then I noticed the glimmer of something shining behind the door, a flash of metal that shouldn't have been there amidst the looming shadows. Mira, wait! I shouted, but she was already crossing the threshold. I rushed forward, but the door slammed shut as a dull thud echoed, and just like that, she was gone, heart pounding, dread washed over me. The billionaire's expression morphed into disbelief as we slammed our palms against the glass, staring through it as if we could both will a vision of her safe return. The haunting silence crackled, and I understood then that whatever lay behind that door now bound us in a new and twisted reality, and we could only hope it wouldn't sever our connection to her forever, leaving us teetering on the brink of despair. The air had shifted, thickening with each agonizing second that passed after the door slammed shut behind Mira. I stood there, my palm pressed against the cold glass, feeling the pulse of my heart quicken in sync with the reality setting in around me. The billionaire, his brow furrowed in an unreadable mix of frustration and concern, placed his hand over mine, grounding me in that moment, but already I could feel the distance stretching between us. Mira! Can you hear me? I yelled, my voice cracking against the chilling silence. All I could hear was the pounding of my heart, a relentless rhythm that echoed in my ears, kicking up a storm of anxiety as I turned to the billionaire. We need to get her out. Calm down, he urged, though his own composure was unraveling slightly. He was a fortress of control, but the urgency in his voice betrayed his concern. We can't blow this. We need to strategize. A shrill scream pierced the night again not far from where we stood. The sound clawed at my insides, and I could barely breathe. She needs us now. Strategies won't save her life. I felt an unrecognizable ferocity rising within me, spurred by the fear of losing her to the unknown. A flicker of defiance sparked in the billionaire's eyes. And charging in blindly could get us all killed. We need information. We need to know where she is in that building. As if on cue, an officer with a walkie-talkie approached us, his expression tight. We're getting reports of multiple disturbances throughout the building. I can't guarantee anyone's safety entering. I don't care. I blurted out, shaking my head, as panic threatened to drown me. If you can't go in, let me see it. Just let me in. I'll find her myself. My words came out in a rush, unfiltered desperation spilling from my lips. Mira has a chance if we do this right, the billionaire insisted, though there was a dull ache in his eyes. Look, she is strong. She'll fight. We have to trust her. But we need to be smart about this. Before I could recoil at the callousness behind that statement, my phone buzzed viciously in my pocket, startling me. I fished it out with trembling hands, half expecting a message from her, but instead, it was a notification, a social media post with a grainy video from someone who had been filming nearby. My heart leapt, it could be anything. I opened the app and stared at the screen. There she was, silhouetted against the dim light of the entrance, her eyes fierce and unyielding as she faced something off camera. I felt breathless as she took a step forward, her silhouette framed by flashes of chaotic outlines moving behind her. But in the background, I saw figures that made my stomach twist, angry voices, crowding her from all directions. "Mira!" I gasped, clutching the phone tightly as the video followed her movements. The camera shook as the bystander was jostled, but I could still see her confrontational stance. "She's not backing down. What is she doing?" I turned to the billionaire, eyes wide with fear. "She's defiant," he murmured, almost to himself. "And infinitely courageous. We need to reach her before those crowds overwhelm her." A sense of urgency ignited within me again, pushing me to act. "We need to find an entrance, any entrance. She can't face them alone." I scanned the chaos unfolding around us, desperate for an ally amongst the officers. Just then, I spotted an older officer observing the scene, his face weathered yet kind. I sprinted over to him, almost colliding as he turned. "I need you to help me get in there. My friend is in danger, and I understand," he said immediately, a spark of unshed empathy flaring in his eyes. "But I can't. Just give me a chance," I begged, desperation spilling into my voice. "I swear I'll follow orders. I'll do whatever it takes. Just please." He hesitated, examining me with weary eyes before offering a slight nod. "All right, but you stick close to me. And if anything goes sideways, you get out, understand?" I nodded, relief and adrenaline coursing through me like wildfire. I glanced back at the billionaire who stood watching, his expression inscrutable as he weighed the risks. But then, he stepped forward, determination shifting his features. "I'll be right behind you," he said, a quiet resolution to his tone. With the officer leading the way, I raced toward a side entrance, my heart thrumming wildly in my chest. I felt a renewed flame of hope igniting within. Mira was strong, and we would find her before it was too late. When we breached the door, the noise of the chaos within was disorienting. Shadows jerked and swayed under glaring lights as we descended dimly lit staircases, weaving through tight corridors with muffled shouts and despair reverberating all around. Deep inside, I anticipated the worst, the gnawing fear of not knowing what had become of my sister in that labyrinth of uncertainty, and then we heard a muffled cry just ahead. My heart froze in my chest. "That has to be her," I gasped, turning to the officer beside me. "Stay back," he ordered, raising a hand. "Let me assess the situation." I fought back the urge to scream, half terrified, half determined. "I'm not abandoning her. Not now." As we inched closer, a shadow moved beyond the next corner, something dark and menacing, and suddenly the officer pulled back. "Wait," he hissed, his voice barely a whisper. "We should retreat, it's not safe." But the cries spiraled from around the corner, now tinged with more than desperation. There was a cry for help that I was already moving, ignoring the warning bells sounding in my head. All that mattered was getting to her, but then, a different sound followed, a shuffling, a rasping whisper that cut through the tension like a knife. "Mira?" I whispered, praying for an answer, yet, before I reached the corner, voices erupted in chaos as a shadow flicked past just out of sight. Was that her? Or someone else? The officer gripped my arm as the world around us shifted again, my heart pounding in a frantic race against time. "We need to go," he insisted, but I couldn't move, a sudden weight pressing down on me as the reality of the situation hit me like a tidal wave. "No. I can't lose her, I can't." Just then, another cry rang out, suddenly cut off, echoing long into the silence that followed. Everything froze as a new fear seeped into my bones. Had I waited too long? The world spun around me in a disorienting whirl, and the last glimmer of hope I clung to shattered in an instant, my own heart hammering a bleak beat in the chaos. I gasped for air as I turned to the officer. "Please let us help her." And just as the shadows seemed to deepen and the cries faded into silence, I felt the floor tremble beneath me, a warning of the new storm barreling toward us, a reckoning I never saw coming, setting the stage for a struggle that would wield either hope or despair. The hallway felt cavernous, the walls closing in as I grappled with my rising dread. Every nerve in my body screamed for action, urging me to push through the thinning veil of silence and reach Mira. But within that silence hung a sinister weight, a thick fog of uncertainty swirling around us. As I stood frozen, the officer's grip tightened around my arm. "I understand how you feel, but we can't rush in without knowing what we're dealing with," he said, his tone a mixture of concern and urgency. Something in his voice betrayed an understanding of my turmoil, as though he had been in a similar position before and had felt the weight of inaction, but I couldn't listen. My mind was racing, locked in a single mantra: Mira needs me. I strained to catch any hint of her presence, listening intently for another echo of her name that might break the oppressive quiet. If I could just hear her, see her, I could breathe again. Then, just when I thought all hope had abandoned me, a whisper threaded through the air, fragile yet fierce. "Help me. Mira." I shouted, the sound tearing from my throat as adrenaline surged. The officer tugged me back, his expression somber and serious. But I had already committed myself to those 2 syllables. The scream had been a tether pulling me forward. Without thinking, I broke free from his grip and pressed onward. I dashed around the corner, ignoring the protests that ricocheted off the walls, my heart a wild drum in my chest. The sight that greeted me was chaotic yet illuminated in fleeting flashes of fluorescent lights. A group of shadowy figures loomed over a crumpled form lying on the ground. It was her, unmistakably. Mira was fighting, even in that vulnerable state, hands raised defiantly against the encroaching darkness that threatened to engulf her. The thrumming chaos around me faded to a dull roar as I dashed toward her, desperate to shield her from whatever was closing in. My heart thudded violently in my chest, a war drum fueling my strides. I felt the officer behind me moving, but I barely registered his presence. My focus narrowed to the figure that was my sister. "Mira. I'm coming," I yelled, my voice rising above the chaos, a desperate beacon that cut through the noise. But as I reached her, the figures shifted, and I froze in horror. They weren't just shadows, they were a crowd, and their faces bore breaches of anger, illuminated by a flicker of light. They seemed suspended in disbelief as they hung over her, the weight of their hostility pressing down like a physical suffocation. "Get away from her!" I shouted, pushing myself in front of Mira, instinctively drawing strength from our bond, but the moment I stepped in, the atmosphere thickened. It took on a hue of danger I hadn't anticipated. One figure turned sharply, and I locked eyes with a pair that were chillingly familiar. It was as if staring into a mirror of a different life. "Why were you protecting her?" They spat, a mix of indignation and something darker coiling around their words. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was the ignition of old wounds, the last slivers of patience fraying amidst the chaos. "She deserves to be treated like a human being." I shot back, the fire in my chest roaring to life. "She's not an object for you to toy with." The movement around me stilled, capturing a moment that both felt like an eternity and a mere heartbeat. I could see Mira behind me, eyes wide and shimmering with mingled fear and pride. I turned slightly to her, searching for strength in her gaze, willing her to recognize the power she possessed even in her moment of vulnerability. The officer caught up to us, his expression resolute, but even he faltered at the sight before him. "Everyone stand down," he commanded, but confidence ebbed as the crowd advanced, and our backs were against the wall with no obvious escape point. One figure from the crowd, tall and imposing, stepped forward with a twisted grin. "This is the end for both of you. You think you can defy us? You think you?" Before he could finish, a deafening crash echoed behind us, a door flung open with violent force. The sudden explosion of sound drew the attention of everyone in the vicinity, including the looming figures. My heart leaped with both hope and dread. Was this rescue or catastrophe? In the blink of an eye, the scene morphed as new figures rushed in, uniforms clearly marked. Officers and security personnel swept through, taking control of the situation. The air crackled with sudden intensity, plunging us all into a chiaroscuro of fear, relief, and the undeniable tension of fear still lurking just beneath the surface. "Mira!" I yelled, as the swarm of new bodies pressed closer, but my heart fell as she staggered back, her face pale, skin clammy, eyes full of uncertainty. why didn't she move toward me? Then, just as recognition dawned on me, the officer beside me pushed forward, flinging himself into the confrontation. Get her out of here. I'll hold them off. No. I screamed, reaching for him, but the urgency of the situation propelled me into action. Mira, come on. We need to go. But the crowd shifted, swallowing him in a wave of bodies as he grasped at the remnants of courage, fighting against their numbers. In that moment, I froze again, the weight of helplessness crashing down like a suffocating mantle, and just when I thought the ground beneath me might crack with despair, I shared a look with Mira that communicated everything I couldn't put into words, a silent promise that we wouldn't give up, not yet. Then, another figure emerged from behind the crowd, and my heart clenched. My chest tightened with terror as I recognized the silhouette. A familiar face dwelled somewhere within the chaos, a ghost from my past rising to confront me in the most crucial moment of our lives. Mira, stay close. Don't let them take you. I yelled, voice wavering as I fought against the dawning horror that gripped me with icy fingers. The shadowy figure stepped forward, voice rising over the din, whispering words that tore into my resolve like shrapnel. You'll never escape this time. Frozen in that hellish moment, I realized what lay ahead, a storm darkening our horizon, the tangled web of our past now threatening to ensnare our future, leaving our fates hanging delicately by a thread, and an aching uncertainty that whispered anew of hope, betrayal, and an unpredictable heart shaking the foundations of our resolve. The air felt even thicker than before, as if the chaos around us had drawn breath and decided to choke us with its weight. I could barely process the looming shadow before me. The flickering fluorescent lights cast harsh glows over the figure, and for a dizzying moment, all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart reverberating in my ears. Milo. The voice, once familiar and comforting, now sent a shiver down my spine. You've really messed up this time. My breath caught as the ghost of my past, a presence long buried in the recesses of my memory, resurfaced before me. Milo, the childhood friend turned bitter adversary. The rift between us had widened years ago, splintered by anger, misunderstanding, and choices made in the heat of youthful passion. Get away from her. I shouted, pushing forward, every protective instinct flaring to life. But the crowd surged like a tide, and Milo didn't back down. He stepped closer, his eyes glinting with a mixture of malice and something more vulnerable that I almost didn't recognize. You don't even know what you're up against, he sneered. We're not the ones you should be afraid of. This is bigger than you can imagine. In my peripheral vision, I could see Mira flinch. The trust we shared, the faith we had in each other, felt precarious, one misstep and it could come crashing down. I turned to her, willing with every fiber of my being for her to see the fire in my soul, the urgency of our situation screaming for action. Mira, please. We have to stick together. She nodded but hesitated, lips trembling. Her vulnerability was palpable, a stark reminder that no matter how fiercely I fought, the world could still tear us apart in an instant. Then came a shout from the crowd behind us, and chaos erupted. Move! Someone bellowed, and the tension shattered as people began to jostle against one another, creating a swirling hurricane of panic. I instinctively reached for Mira, fingers gripping hers in a desperate attempt to tether us together amidst the confusion. Mira! I yelled again, the urgency in my voice pulling her from her stupor. We have to go, now. But fear laced her features as she glanced back at Milo, who stood unmoved, a cruel smile stretching across his lips. In this fleeting moment, I saw not just a rival but pain, a shadow of a boy I once knew, curled up beneath layers of bitterness and resentment. Why, Milo? I asked, the question escaping me unbidden. Why would you do this? He laughed, sharp and bitter, making my stomach churn. You think it's only about her? This has always been about you, about proving that you can't escape your past. You dragged us into this, and now you'll pay the price. Panic surged within me, but the glimmer of hope flickered still. Around us, officers attempted to restore order, but my focus laser-locked on the threads of connection binding me to Mira. I could see the flicker of courage ignite in her eyes, a spark awakening even amidst the dread clouding our world. With renewed determination, I turned back to the fray, urging her forward. "We'll figure this out. Together. Just stay by my side." In that instant, a burst of energy erupted from the cluster of officers as they forcefully pushed their way through the barricade, struggling to separate the crowd. Sirens wailed in the distance, a sound that felt like an omen of impending change. Just as I thought we might find an escape route, a hand gripped my shoulder tightly, a vice that spun me to face a new officer, his eyes scanning for signs of distress. "Are you all right?" "We're getting everyone out of here," he said with an authority that sparked a flicker of hope. But then I saw the look in his gaze. It was the kind of glance that swept across my sister and me, but lingered a heartbeat too long on Mira. It was a tension I hadn't noticed before, but in that moment, it felt electric, dangerous. "What about him?" I asked, gesturing to Milo, who stood watching us like a predator in the shadows. I didn't want to leave him unchecked. His laughter echoed like a warning bell in my mind. "He's not the problem right now," the officer replied, his voice firm but layered with unease. "We need to focus on regrouping. He's expendable compared to the chaos our intel suggests is coming." "What are you talking about?" My chest throbbed with confusion. "What kind of chaos?" But before he could reply, the door I had seen burst open earlier jammed back open again, and an ominous figure entered, a man in a dark trench coat, his presence commanding attention like a black storm rolling in with veils of rain. He scanned the scene, eyes narrowing onto me and then swiftly shifting to Milo, a flicker of recognition dancing between them. Before I could even process what was happening, the officer beside me went rigid, his body pulling back as if repelled. "Get away!" he shouted, panic leaking into his tone. The dark-coated figure advanced, a blend of malicious intent and unrestrained power radiating off him like heat from a flame. "Milo, finish this," he said, voice dripping with authority. My heart raced. I was losing the thread, spiraling further into chaos, my grip on hope slipping as the landscape around us morphed into something entirely unpredictable. What untold horrors were embedded in this dark alliance weaving around us? "Mira. We need to," I started, but before I could finish, the room erupted as the sound of gunfire crackled through the air, each shot drowning out the shrieks of confusion that enveloped us like a shroud. Panic surged again, a tidal wave hotter and more relentless than before, and as I pulled Mira closer, I realized that the worst was yet to come. Choices would be made, lines would be drawn, and in this labyrinth of peril, the uncertain futures of us both hung precariously on the edge of a knife, waiting to be severed by fate's cruel hand. The air thickened with chaos, a prickling electricity that crackled through my skin as gunfire erupted in the shadows, each shot a cruel punctuation in this surreal nightmare. I felt Mira's breath hitch beside me. We were both surging with adrenaline, haunted by the specter of violence looming over us like a dark cloud. My heart raced frantically, drowning out every thought but one: we had to escape. "Follow me!" I shouted, my voice barely cutting through the cacophony, grasping her hand with all the strength I could muster. But Mira hesitated, eyes wide with fear as her gaze darted between the fluctuating shadows of danger and the stark reality of our situation. "Milo," she murmured, uncertainty tinging her voice, but I squeezed her hand, willing her to trust me. "I know he's dangerous. But right now, we can't focus on him. We have to get out." My insistence broke through her transient spell of doubt. I tugged her fiercely in the direction of a side door, adrenaline propelling us forward while chaos expanded behind us like a raging tide. Just as we turned the corner, we fell into a small alcove, colliding into the rough edges of a barricade. The sounds of mayhem faded momentarily, and a suffocating silence hung thick around us. It was then I thought maybe we had a chance, a way to escape the tumult. "Mira," I whispered urgently, "are you with me?" Her eyes shimmered with something between determination and fear, and in that moment, I saw the woman I'd always known beneath the layers of anxiety closing in. She nodded, breath steadying like the flicker of a candle flame igniting within her. Suddenly, the quiet was shattered by the holler of voices scrambling toward us. "This way!" An officer yelled, rushing through the fray to bring order amidst the disorder. The calls echoed, forcing us back into action. Now, I urged, heart galloping as I shot back into the current of the chaotic spiral, hand firmly clasped around hers. She followed, stepping into the fray with a steely resolve I hadn't expected but was grateful to witness. But just as we burst back into the main hall, a figure emerged, a shadow against the light, his silhouette instantly chilling my bones. Milo stood there, eyes alight with malice, ensuring that our path of escape was now draped in peril. "Mira, no!" I shouted, feeling the horror rise within me as she halted, caught in the treacherous dance between abandon and loyalty. "Don't let him get into your head. Milo, let her go." I charged, adrenaline coursing through me. "She's not a pawn in your game." But he merely laughed, a hollow sound that seemed to echo off the walls, blending seamlessly with the chaos surrounding us. "You think this is about me? This is about the bigger picture, her potential. She's merely a stepping stone to what I need." The clarity of his words struck Mira, and the fierceness in her gaze flickered. "No, I won't be anyone's tool," she declared, stepping back, moving away from him as if cleansing herself of the past. "I'm not afraid of you." At that moment, the tension hit a boiling point. The dark figure from earlier re-emerged, an ominous figure whose presence exuded a sense of dread, almost rallying an appeal to gather both anger and despair. "Enough!" he commanded, his voice cutting through the noise like a knife. "We have no time for theatrics. The mission is paramount." "Mission?" I breathed, bewildered, my heart slamming against my ribs. Somehow, this had turned from a battle for survival to something much darker, an operation spiraling down into malice where life was collateral damage. From the corner of my eye, I caught the officer we had seen earlier, now grasping for control. "We need to disperse this crowd," he yelled, motioning for help as if fate had finally turned on our side. "Get her out of here, now." And in that flash of clarity, everything ignited, the resolve of our small group shattering whatever facade Milo and his cohorts had carefully constructed. I turned urgently to Mira, seizing this fleeting opportunity. "We can't wait. Now." With panic cemented in her features, we surged forward together. Hands locked in a tight grip, preparing to push through the swirling maelstrom anew. But Milo loomed, eyes darkening with fury. "Mira!" he shouted, an edge of desperation creeping into his voice as he lunged forward, but something shifted in her. Some newfound strength flared within her, igniting a determination that leaped from her soul. At that moment, I saw her embrace her power, the connection we had forged swelling fiercely between us, igniting with renewed vigor. "No!" she yelled back, voice fierce and uncompromising. "I choose my own path." As she turned toward the dark figure, defiance pulsing through her every pore, the unexpected came crashing down as the figure momentarily hesitated, and amidst the chaos, it felt as though time hung suspended, and in that moment of sheer brilliance, we slipped past the throng. The weight of fear turned to freedom, sweeping through my veins, propelling us toward a brighter exit, leaving Milo's fury trailing far behind. That we burst through the door, sunlight pouring over us like a baptism, washing away the darkness that had threatened to engulf us. I heard the distant siren still blaring, lives intertwining, but with every step forward, I felt the shackles begin to break with each footfall. Footfalls turned to strides, and strides into a sprint as we raced away from the danger, away from the past that sought to tether us to despair. "Mira!" I gasped, adrenaline dwindling as we slowed to catch our breath. "Are you all right?" She stopped abruptly, hands on her hips, gaze unwavering. "We need to face this together," she said, conviction radiating from her like a beacon. "Not just for us, but for everyone, my family, our dreams, everything." I felt a swell of hope rise within me, a flame I thought had been extinguished, reigniting with her words. "Together," I affirmed, reaching for her hand, which she immediately grasped, a connection that lit the path ahead with warm, vibrant energy. Behind us lay the remnants of chaos, events that had twisted our fates, but here, in this moment, I understood that the darkness would not hold power over us any longer. As we stepped into a new chapter, I leaned closer to her. The gravity of everything we had fought for culminating into an undeniable truth. "Whatever comes next, I'm with you," I declared, my voice steady and resolute. She nodded, her own determination solidifying like a river carving through rock, capable of overcoming any obstacle in its path. "And whatever happens, we'll face it as one." With the sun dipping below the horizon, painting the sky with hues that promised rebirth and hope, I gripped her hand tighter, and as we walked into the unknown, I felt an overwhelming surge of conviction that together, we were unbreakable. And no matter the battles ahead, the choices we made would define us not just by fear but by the extraordinary resilience of hope, that together, we would reshape our stars, illuminating whatever darkness lay beyond with the promise of a brighter dawn. In that moment, beneath the fading light, I whispered the truth that renewed my spirit: together, we will rise.